we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining another episode of the Giro podcast. I'm your host, Jordan. For those of you who haven't, please go back and listen to some of our old episodes. The last one that we just did with Coach's Corner with the famous Danny Roberts-Clark. It's a really interesting one, so please do go back and listen and let us know what you think. But enough with the past, on with today. I am joined with a GB cyclist, the team manager of Internationelles, and more recently the face of UCI through the Choose to Challenge campaign, Louise Gibson. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Very, very good.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. I was just about to say thank you. Thank you for joining. It's a really, I'm really excited about this one. We've been speaking this week, and I really feel that this one is going to be a good one.
Good stuff.
So, obviously, it's a really interesting time at the moment, and we're going to sort of get into the details about what it is that you do and what you have been doing. But it's a really interesting time for women's cycling, and I think the last few weeks has seen this just almost like the culmination of many years of work seem to be coming to the surface.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's like a real sort of like paradigm shift, and it's like the beginning of something really new. Everything from we just had International Women's Day.
Yeah.
The Choose to Challenge campaign, that was a part of that, which, I mean, my social media was just covered with it, and it was all very, very positive. More recently we saw the Ouleau do the women's only magazine, which is just amazing. And we can get into
print it 3 times.
They had to print it 3 times, and they're just about to print out another one. It's just brilliant.
Wow,
It's just so good. And then, as I say, we'll break some of these things apart a little bit further. But you were involved in championing, bringing to the attention the pay disparity that was happening in Omloop.
Yeah.
And again, social media, was just rife with it, which is amazing. And there's all these sort of, conversations that are happening at the minute around women's cycling and around equality and which is really great. But obviously this isn't new for you.
No.
You've been involved in, trying to champion some of these causes for a long time. So let's kind of like, so yourself, like, let's talk about your journey of 1, cycling.
Okay.
And then 2, how Internationelles came to be about and your involvement. And we'll go from there.
Cool. So I'm a relatively new cyclist, probably 6-7 years now. I used to run.
Okay.
Wasn't a very good runner, but enjoyed running and keeping fit that way. But I just kept getting injured. So, shin splints, sore knees, all that stuff. Eventually, just kept running, and I was doing long distance stuff. So wanted to do London Marathon each year, but it went so badly that I got quite a bad hip injury. Ended up having surgery on my hip, and the specialist said that I needed to just stop running forever. Yeah. Otherwise, I would have to have a hip replacement. Oh my goodness! And then that would have to be redone every 15 years or whatever. So, basically stop running. And have you ever tried cycling? And I was just like, oh. When I was a kid, I used to ride around on a bike and stuff like that, but I wasn't into it. And I used to go to work and laugh at the guys that would show up dressed like they were doing the Tour de France and the full kit for a 4-mile commute. And I was like, I do not want to be a cyclist. So I was pretty reluctant, but then was missing the running and the exercise and stuff. So I actually went to bicycle in Richmond and was just looking at bikes and stuff, and they said, "Oh, you want to buy a bike?" I was like, "Not really, but I have to."
Don't have a choice.
So
I'm being
reluctantly
forced.
bought one, and then I just got into it. I loved it. I appreciated that the freedom that I had on my bike, and I lived at the time. I was living in Kew, so just used to go to Richmond Park and tootle around a bit, and it was hard, but I enjoyed it, and then just started taking it a bit more and more seriously, and I was going through a bit of a hard time in my life at the time as well. My marriage was breaking down and I was bogged down with the kids. But I started getting a bit more freedom. When they started school, I then used that time to go out on my bike and enjoyed it, but was always in a rush, always in a bad mood. So then was training pretty hard because I was just like,
of course,
racing around on my
getting
bike.
Getting it all out. Yeah, absolutely.
And then entered a sportive or something. It was London to Reading, I think it was. I don't know if that starts here. It started at a race course, but I don't think it was the one Here it might be Epsom or something, I don't know.
Sure, Kempton maybe.
Yeah.
Because that's on that way
I
up
did
there.
that and was just keeping up with like pelotons of proper cyclists.
Oh,
and
wow.
I was still reluctant. So I was wearing London Marathon running gear, trainers. I wasn't clipped in or any of that stuff.
Amazing.
They were like, oh, you're quite good. I was like, well, I'm a runner and all this. And then I think that was what changed it. I was like, right, okay, I'm doing all right at this.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I want to do it more. So then I bought an amazing bike. That's the bike that I still ride, actually. So I've had that now about 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, spent a chunk of divorce money on it. It's like, hey, this is my new baby.
Absolutely.
And then I've just thrown myself into it. When I felt brave enough, I joined a local club.
Yeah.
It took me a while to, I don't know, I just thought I didn't have a place in cycling because it is quite intimidating to start off.
Absolutely.
And so male dominated.
Absolutely.
That I had to feel sure enough of, the speed I was going and being able to, just answer back, I suppose, to a lot of the chat you get when you're on a bike. So yeah, joined my local club. I live out in Marlow, so I joined the club in Henley, which are pretty strong. And each time it was a proper workout. I'd come back exhausted.
Was it quite a traditional club? Is it a club that's been around a long time?
So, yeah. There's only a couple of women members. There's much more now. A lot has been done over the last couple of years. But when I joined, say 4 or 5 years ago, that there would only be one other woman on each of the meets, and people would be seriously good. But that was great for me. It really pushed me on, and I was training hard and stuff like that. And then got a coach. Started working with Will Girling, and that then my training became more focused. And he was then talking to me about proper nutrition and recovery and all that stuff, which I hadn't been doing. I'd just been going out smashing it, and then my legs would be sore because I was just, the sun's shining, I'll go on my bike. And I just got more and more into it. And then, so I would say I'm a cyclist now. I'm definitely not a runner. I couldn't be bothered to run at all now. God. So I'm a proper cyclist. And then must be just over 2 years ago, I first heard about this French team, Donon des Elo Velo, who have been riding the full route of the Tour de France the day before the pros in a move for equality because there is no women's Tour de France. Heard about them, and then each year they invite people to join. So you have to, submit an application. And so many of us non-French submitted applications that they actually put us all in touch. They said, you can't all join the team. We're going to keep it French only. But if you want to form your own team, you're welcome to come and ride with us.
Oh, interesting.
So that's what we did. So there was,
How about it?
we had a guy, Nicholas, who was based in France, and he knew the French team too. And he helped us with the logistics, and he'd worked out the costs and stuff like that of, the logistics of either one van or two vans. And he basically said we either need a team of 5 riders or 10 riders. And I think we had about 6 who'd applied. So then a couple of us roped in a couple of extra friends, and then we had 10. Didn't know all the girls at all. I knew a couple of them from here, but we had Australians, an American, Dutch girl. So we all met at the Tour de France when we went there, which was a bit bonkers.
Wow. Okay.
So it was a bit of a social experiment too, because it could have gone really badly if we didn't get on or something.
And what year was
this? Intense. This was 2019.
This was 2019. Okay, fine.
Yeah. So we launched the team on International Women's Day. So exactly 2 years ago, really. And then we just started telling people what we were going to do. And for us, it was more than the Tour de France.
Absolutely.
It was more just about equality.
Yeah.
So we were using the Tour de France as our, stage to get people interested in what we were doing, because they were like, oh my gosh, you're going to do as amateurs, and we have day jobs, and I've got a couple of kids, and if we were able to do the Tour de France, then the pros definitely should get that chance. So we used that as our talking piece, and then we would talk about all the stuff to do with prize money and podium girls and all that stuff. So things have got better the last few years, but there is still no women's Tour de France. There's talks that one's going to come next year, but we don't know anything more than rumours. The ASO haven't given any actual statement apart from one's coming. So...
Well, I mean, we can get into that short. I mean, obviously, last year was supposed to be the first year, but obviously that got postponed.
Yes.
But this year's the first year of Paris-Roubaix.
Right. Yeah.
Which just seems crazy that
that came out of nowhere. That wasn't even rumoured.
No, just very, very strange. But
yes.
I mean, I'm interested because obviously your tenure in cycling is quite short. So to go from joining a local club in Henley, talk to me about that transition but that journey of recognizing that there are some issues within cycling, a sport that you come to really enjoy and love, to a point where actually I think we can do something about it. I mean, because it's not like it was over a few decades of experience. You're only talking a handful of years. So, I mean, was there anything in particular that really prompted you? Was it the people that you were surrounded with? What was that journey from going from relatively new cyclist to suddenly on an international stage?
I think it was just recognizing how I'd found it hard and intimidating to get into, but then I had quite a good cycling community here in London, and that gave me confidence in myself of being able to stand up for myself, and then wanted to stand up for other women.
Yeah, amazing.
And get them involved too, and just to break down the barriers a bit more, and just be like, if I can do it, then anyone can do it.
Yeah.
And just to make women on bikes be a more normal thing.
Yeah.
That anyone can, but you have got to train, especially if you're going to do the big stuff. You've got to take it seriously.
Yeah, of course.
But anyone could do that, and that was the thing for me, is just I wanted to make it more normal. And the biggest thing for me is that I'm not okay with the fact that little girls might not have the same opportunities as their brothers just because they were born a girl.
Yeah.
And that's what spurs me on, is to just try and make a difference. But not for me. I'm in my 40s. I'm past it. It's not for me to get a proper pro deal or a race or anything that I've been shouting for. But it's for the little girls, so they can grow up to be anything they want to be.
Yeah.
And just have the same opportunities.
I mean, we live in a very, quote unquote woke time, but it's desperately sad that we're still having this conversation.
Oh, it's shocking. It's unbelievable.
We, obviously as a cafe, we've been open for 7.5 years, and, we started doing rides that were open to everybody. But the reality is we did recognize that it was, I've been involved or in and around cycling for 15 or so years. And yes, you referenced it earlier, it's incredibly male dominated, but there was a part of me that was saying, well, we live in a very kind of open society. If you want to get on a bike, just get on the bike. But you actually didn't recognize and realize that there are still very like invisible barriers.
Yes.
Whether, from a cycling standpoint, male or female, if you don't have the right kit or the right bike, it can be very scary.
Yes.
But then add to that the fact if you're a female going to a very male dominated sport, there are, huge barriers there.
Yeah.
And we've tried, there's been things that we've done that have worked. There have been things that we've tried that haven't worked. But we really kind of felt passionate about our rides. We're not a club, so it's open to anybody. We'll try as best we can to make it available for all, levels. We do development rides. And actually, that's something that we're really going to be focusing on this year. Yeah. Where it's just about kind of focusing on beginners, really, or people new to cycling. But help to break down those barriers. And yes, it is very sad that on top of that, there are barriers of just because of your gender. Yeah. And you can't get around it, if we look outside the cafe today, it's a Saturday, it's weekend. The sad truth is the reality of people that have stopped by are men. Yeah. Yeah. And whilst there are a huge growing amount of women, which is great, it is still a very male-dominated sport. Yeah, I think we've seen quite a lot of good change over the last year. There's definitely more people on bikes and more women on bikes. Absolutely. And it is a good community. So, I was cycling this morning in Richmond Park, and every time I see a girl, I'm like, hi! and everyone waves and stuff like that, which is really great. Yeah. And I love to encourage people, because it doesn't have to be that hard. You don't have to know everything about the bike. No. Like, I'm not a mechanic. I don't pretend to be. I don't need to know how it works. I need to know how to ride it, and I need to know how to make an appointment with bicycles so they can help me out if something's gone wrong with it. But I think that's one of the intimidating things to start with, is people say so many things to you and try and give you advice on your saddle height and things like that. I just think, oh my God, you're not an expert. You don't know either. But they'll talk like they do, and if you're not confident in yourself, that would put you off, or you'd be embarrassed and stuff. I mean, would you say that you came into that club that you were talking about in Henley with just a natural confidence that you was like, well, I don't really care if I'm the only, or was it quite a big hurdle? It was quite a big hurdle, and I waited until I really felt that I could stand up for myself. And that's maybe because I wasn't as confident that I waited that point, because a lot of people would just rock up and people would come all the time and just be like, you're not really ready for this, because it is quite a difficult club and fast rides and stuff. And I was just checking on my Strava, I was like stalking all the other people and checking my average speed before I went, whereas other people do just rock up. Mostly men are just like, I'll be fine, and they're not. Yeah. But I wanted to be super confident in my own ability.
And then the bike shop had given me that too. They were just like, Lou, come, just join a club. You're going to be fine. The people I was riding with in Richmond Park were all members of clubs too. So
it's definitely important to have the people in your ear that are saying, like, you're doing okay.
Yeah.
No matter like where you are, like you're doing okay.
Yes.
And I think that we as kind of experienced cyclists have to really, more so than ever now, really have to play our part to kind of just give people that pat on the back to say, hey, you're doing good, and that bit of encouragement.
And what I find amazing is some of the messages I get back from people of, me just giving people a bit of encouragement. It means so much to them. And people say, oh, you've made my day, you've made my week, and just a little bit of advice or just checking up on me. And you have a lot of power to, encourage other people. And I hate the whole influencer thing. I'd like to encourage and, inspire people. And that's what I'm about, not influencing. That's rubbish.
No, I completely agree. Completely agree. So 2019, that was when I first, came across yourself, the Internationelles, and it was a non-cycling friend of mine sent me a link to BBC. And obviously you guys had been on breakfast.
Yes,
all kitted up, and it was I forget the exact timeline of it. Obviously it was before the tour. But talk us through that. I mean, because obviously this French team have been doing it for a little while. So talk us through your journey in 2019 to do the tour.
Yeah. So we were forming the team and, all training, but not really knowing what it was going to be about and stuff like that. But it was great. It was full on. We'd have to, ride 10 hours a day, sleep about 5 hours a night. We were in pretty budget accommodation. We were doing long transfers, and Rob was one of the van drivers. It was rough for
crazy.
All of us. It was full on.
Rob sat here just shaking his head.
So it was full on, but we made such a difference. That's the beauty of the Tour de France, is it transcends cycling.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be a cycling fan to not get involved on the Tour de France, because the way they film it is so beautiful. All the aerial shots of France, and it's France at its best.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everywhere we went was pristine, and it was beautiful. It was absolutely wonderful. And there'd be people that would travel with the Tour de France. They'd be camped up at the side of the road. We'd see them on one mountain, and then maybe a week later we'd see them again.
Amazing.
And they would recognise us. Our names were being painted on the roads. And people back home were talking about us. I was doing quite a lot of, stories on Instagram and like telling everything from the real low moments to just like, how amazing is this? And it was wonderful. And we got a lot more interest in us than we would have ever imagined, because we thought it was fun and it was great and we'd get the chance to talk about stuff, but people were really listening, because a lot of people didn't realise there is no women's Tour de France. They just presumed they hadn't seen it or whatever. But when we said, actually, all they have is La Course, which is like a 2-3 hour race.
It's a token gesture.
That's it.
Yeah.
People were like, what?
Yeah.
So a lot of people were interested. And then, we had a contact with BBC Breakfast, and they just wanted us on the show. They couldn't believe that this bunch of girls were riding the whole thing with none of the extra stuff that the pros have. So we had one massage for the whole thing. Yeah. One of the girls had someone fly out to give us a massage, half an hour massage. And that was, I think, on day 9. We had a rest day then.
Gosh.
And the food was terrible, and it was hard. We met Ineos. And Luke Rowe was like, I couldn't do what you're doing. Yeah. He's like, fair play to you. Like, it was hard.
Well, it puts it into perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah. And their setup was unreal. You know, like they had all their lorries. They had a washing machine each, and their chefs were all there. And we were like, cracking a baguette open, slapping a bit of cheese in, and
that's so funny.
Hoping for the best, washing our clothes in the shower.
Of course, they have a washing machine each. I mean, why wouldn't you, right?
It was nuts. Yeah. But so we had a lot of interest, and it ended up on BBC Breakfast, and then people were interested. People were just, finding out that cycling is in the dark ages in a lot of ways, about just how male-dominated it is, how there is almost no equality at all, so far behind.
So, I mean, maybe that's a good sort of position now to sort of like just talk about what's happened recently, and from that we can like really discuss more about how cycling is very much in the dark ages in some ways. I mean, obviously the last couple of decades we've seen across sport, not just cycling, but in spite of cycling, but across sport, like real lengths and efforts made to encourage, support and champion women's sport. I remember we did a podcast with our sort of like our women's Giro race team last year. And one of the things I mentioned was, I remember maybe 10 years ago going onto the BBC Sport website and it referenced England football team. So I clicked it, but it was England's women's football team.
Oh, right.
But the fact that they hadn't used the women's term was a really big statement, because it was like, no, this is just the England football team. It doesn't matter if it's men's or women. This is the England football team, which is a really big statement.
Yeah.
Obviously, in tennis, we've seen equal pay start to come across and equal coverage. And there just seems to be, and in cycling, there's certainly been a lot more coverage.
Yes.
That we have the women's tour here in the UK. Every year a group of us go out to watch the Tour of Flanders. The Tour of Flanders happens, and it seems as though it's all going. A lot of the races, not the Tour de France, but have the equal, or the equivalent of a women's race. And then this year, after COVID, it's exciting. We've got the classics starting.
Yes.
En loop happens. We watch the women's race. We watch the men's race. It's there's excitement in the air, and then you just drop a bomb of the pay.
Yeah.
And it was just this. I remember seeing this post going, oh my God. And again, social media just stopped.
Yeah.
So if we'll put a link in the description below, but essentially the men's, the David Belletti, or I forget the guy's name who won, his prize money for winning was €16,000.
Yes.
And the women's winner, was it Van der Bruggen?
Yeah.
It was €930.
Yeah. So 5%.
And you put it on this pie chart, and it was like, oh my goodness, like this. It just seems so strange that because over recent years there has been so much coverage, there has been so much more emphasis put on equality, and a lot of people saying the right things.
Yeah.
But when it came down to it, £930. So I mean, maybe just talk a little bit about, obviously, one, how you found that out, and then two, what's happened, the conversation since then, because really the internet kind of stopped for a little while. Everybody was talking about it. Yeah.
That's the sort of stuff that I've been, highlighting the last couple of years. Yeah. So we try and post fairly often on the Internationelles account with if something's happening, and trying to get people, this is how you can make a difference within women's cycling. Watch the races, because when they're on, they're incredible. Yeah. It's really exciting racing. Yeah. And people saying, oh, no one wants to watch women's racing. That's rubbish. We know that's not true.
That's not true. Yeah.
We've been showing, the interest and stuff. And a few of the posts I have done, when I've done the simple visual stuff, I did one when the Tour de France route was announced last October. There was a tiny bit talking about La Course. And so I wound it back and I just timed that, and it was 31 seconds out of the whole hour's coverage. 31 seconds was about women's cycling. So I did a pie chart for that as well, and that went crazy. Everyone was just like, what, this isn't good enough.
No.
So then the other day, I think it was on Twitter that I'd seen the prize, and I thought, that cannot be right.
Yeah.
And the Cyclist Alliance were talking about it as well. So just did some digging to make sure that it was right. So went on to Cycling Tips had that as well, and I just thought, okay, this is actually the prize money for the winners. Didn't want it to be too negative, so I think the day of the race, I said, this race is happening today. We're really excited. Watch the race. Yeah. It's going to be brilliant. But then the next day, I was like, hope you enjoyed the race, but look what happened. Yeah. And just, that pie chart was just... Yeah. And it just went crazy. Yeah. Everyone started sharing it. People were like, are you sure? And I put where I got the stats from so people can go and look into it. And it's not right.
No, it's not right.
But there's plenty of reasons. And then what I couldn't believe was I'd put it on Twitter as well. I think I'm a little bit braver on my own account.
Yeah, sure.
I want to keep the Internationales one quite positive and stuff like that. But I'll put a little bit more judgment through my own. So I put some stuff on there on Twitter, and the race organizer from En Loop actually answered back on my one, just saying, I'm really sad that you're talking about this because we're doing so much for women's cycling. How dare you focus on this one small issue? And if you think there is to solving women's cycling is the prize money, then you don't know anything. And I was just like, oh shit, wow. I've ruffled some feathers here if I've got the race organizer actually commenting on my stuff, and thought, oh, should I have done it? And I was like, actually, you can't just say, oh, we're doing all this other stuff, therefore ignore this huge thing. And people do have the power to make change. So then what was incredible was a couple of days later, found out that it was going to be the same prize money for, the Strade Bianche.
Strade Bianche, yeah.
Same thing. I think the women's prize pot was going to be a little bit bigger, but it wasn't more than $2,000.
935.
right, versus 16 grand again, because
Yeah,
that 16 grand is mandated by the UCI.
That's correct,
and they don't have those same, instructions for women's cycling, and they say if they did, then actually a lot of women's races wouldn't even happen, which would also be terrible. So it is a difficult situation.
Yeah.
But one of the fans on Instagram's like, right, well, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and he started a GoFundMe.
Yeah, this is amazing.
And this went mental too. He got involved with us and with the Cyclist Alliance to try and push it to show it was legit. Because a few people were like, how do we know this guy isn't off to Barbados? We're paying for him to go on holiday. Hang on.
That's right.
So the Cyclist Alliance got involved, and they were going to help distribute the money to the winners and stuff like that. And it was unbelievable. I thought we'd get some money. I never thought we'd beat what the men were to get. So it was for the top 5 winners. So we were comparing the top 5 men and this GoFundMe account. And it went down to the wire though. We were ready to, as it was getting close, I was like, I'm going to make it happen. I'm just going to, and I'd already donated, you donated. I had a couple of friends on, and we pushed it over.
Yeah, perfect.
Just to make a statement.
No,
really.
but that's it. But it's obviously as like it's not a sustainable model.
No, not at all. Not at all.
As a statement,
yes,
and also as almost like a litmus test to see where people's, people put their money where their mouth is. You know what I mean?
There's over 1,000 people, wasn't it? Had put something in.
Over 1,000 people have taken that extra step to actually, no, I feel really passionate about this. I remember, so back in 2018, I went up to the tour down under.
Oh, cool.
Obviously, I worked with a couple of Australian brands, so they invited me out there, and if you ever get the chance to go, it's brilliant. But obviously they run the men's race alongside the women's race. It happened on the same days, and it's all around one city, Adelaide. And so you watch the women's racing and you watch the men's racing, and it's great. But we got invited to like sort of the official like wrap party, the finish up party, and so the main hotel in Adelaide that pretty much all the male teams stay at is the Hilton. So there's a big bar down there and like a nice restaurant, and they've got a conference suite. So that's where this kind of like official wrap party was, and met a few people, and a friend of a friend was a soigneur for a women's team. Okay. And everyone was all very excited about this. It was a really, exciting event, and, it's finishing off what's been a really good week. And then she said something, and she's like, well, it's okay for the men. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? She's like, well, all the men's teams are staying in this hotel. And I won't say what team that she was involved with, but, they're saying we're literally staying in a non-air conditioned school hall down the road. God. And it was like, what? And obviously they've been invited to this official sign off of the week, and, kind of they're all up on the stage. And it was just this moment of like, wait, that doesn't make sense. And she's like, oh, it's ridiculous. Like, we don't get paid very, well for this, and most of the riders, are barely making a salary. Most of them are also working jobs.
Yes.
But they're just doing it for the love of it.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow.
Yeah.
That was the first time I was like, wow, you just assume that if they're on a professional team, on a world tour team, and some of them have been Olympians and all the rest of it, that they would actually... You just assume that it's a full-time job, and they've got a salary and they're supported because they've got sponsors. It's not.
It's hard. And that's the thing about the prize pot, is actually it makes more of a difference to the women, because their base salaries are nothing like the guys either. Yeah. So that prize is actually really helpful. Yeah. So whereas it's a tip, it's petty cash or whatever for the guys.
I mean, even with the men's, I mean, from the famous kind of like guys who are in the teams to right down the bottom, like the pay gap is vast.
Yeah.
But at least there's a salary.
Yes. Yeah.
And unfortunately, with some of the women's teams, there's not.
And to do all the training that they're doing, and having to work as well, and pay for all their stuff. Yeah. And the thing that's been interesting is we've got quite a lot of the female peloton are following us and really encouraging of what we're doing with Internationelles, which is really reassuring that we're doing the right thing. Yeah. It's almost we don't have as much to lose by saying what they want to, but some of them feel like they should just be grateful for what they've got and are too scared to rock the boat. Yeah. Because it's been hard for so long. So they are behind us, shouting for them and for their rights and stuff.
I mean, that's got to mean a huge amount to them.
Yes.
I mean, this is a very big question, but I mean, what do you see the root issue as just being it is a very it's a sport that's got a lot of heritage. It's a sport that's been around for, over a century, Is that the root of the issue, or do you think there's something more like, with this kind of disparity between the men's and, women's from a professional standpoint, not on a local level, but on a professional standpoint, like what's the root issue?
A lot of it is tradition, because it's always been that way.
Yeah, sure.
And I think a lot of it has to be there are just too many males making the decisions.
Yeah.
If there was some females, in there making decisions, then it would have to change. And they obviously don't see what an issue it is, because it doesn't really affect them.
Yeah.
It's like people saying, "Oh, that's not sexist." It's like, well, you can't say that to someone unless you've been affected.
Yes.
So I think it's a combination of tradition, because it's a very traditional sport, with wonderful history over the years and stuff like that, but some of it hasn't changed.
No, of course not.
The Tour de France, we're edition 108 this year.
Yeah.
It's an institution, so to make big change in that is a big deal.
Yeah, and it's a there's aspects of cycling that we really love. There's from a consumer standpoint, you can go and race on the same roads as your pros that you look up to, and then you can see photos of pros doing it 100 years ago. I mean, where else do you get a chance to do that? You don't really. But then when you put it in the context of modern day, you realise there are some issues, and it's amazing what you're doing. It's amazing that you guys are standing up and you are being vocal, because thankfully somebody is, and hopefully this kind of curve continues to sort of go upwards, where more people are speaking up and championing change.
Yes, I hope so, and that's what we've been really happy about too. Is just it is working.
Yeah,
people having the conversations, and the GoFundMe last week, that shouldn't have to happen. And like you said, it's not sustainable, but the conversations that have come out of it and showing that there is interest in women's sport and all of that is fantastic. And change will come from that. We can't just do all that and then nothing happen.
Yeah.
So if race organisers are a bit more nervous about us finding out what's happening and us talking about it, good. Yeah. Maybe they'll change it. Yeah. Or maybe the UCI are talking about doing more. They're focused on coverage, and I do believe that coverage is the biggest thing, because without that, who's going to want to sponsor a race? And
I mean, coverage is definitely increasing. Mm-hmm. But it is, and you could hear the frustration in last week's Strade Bianche. The commentators who were commentating on the women's race were saying, "We're really sorry, we've only got half an hour." Yeah. Like, as in, that's what the race organisers have given us. We would love to have covered it from kilometre 0 through to the finish, but we've only been given half an hour.
Got the last 20k, and
they're almost embarrassed about it. And for anybody who knows cycling, like the last 20k, the race is over. As in, like, kind of all the exciting stuff's happened, and now you're kind of building towards the finish. Mm-hmm. But it's better than nothing. Yes. So you're right. There definitely is.
But it actually wasn't the legal minute, so they meant to have to do 45 minutes.
Oh, really?
And that's why the Giro Rosa, they've lost their World Tour status, because they didn't give live coverage last year. They tried to excuse it of COVID, blah, blah, blah. UCI have booted them off the World Tour, so Giro Rosa isn't on the World Tour this year because they didn't do the minimum coverage. And the same with Strade Bianche. It wasn't 45 minutes at all. But I don't know if anything's happening with that. But so those are the limits there to try and push coverage so we can see more, and the races are exciting. They're properly like, oh my gosh, like right from the start, because there's none of that dead time. I think it was on Loop actually a couple of years ago where the women caught up with the men, because they set off about half an hour after them, and the men were tootling around because they had a much longer stage, and there's all that dead time in the middle where they were all just messing around. Women actually caught up. Then the women had to stop. So anyone that had made good, gains and stuff, then everyone else caught them up. They standing there for about 20 minutes, all got really cold. It's like, these are professionals. You can't treat them like that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So I think that was on Loop a couple of years ago. And it's a mess. But hopefully talking about it will get, positive change to happen. So,
I mean, speaking of that, we recently had this Choose to Challenge campaign, hashtag Choose to Challenge, which again, it was massively busy on social media and various platforms. Talk a little bit about that, because I suppose the reason why I'm bringing that up is it's all fair enough for people to post about stuff and to repost and use that hashtag, but unless I mean, people who listen to the podcast have heard me speak about these things in the past. Like, I really don't have any time for hype, and I don't have any time for, as you say, like influencers. Like, it really rubs me up the wrong way, because the question is, what is the legacy? Like, what's the lasting change coming from this? If it's just a few people reposting it, then I'd rather not. Like, I'd rather actually kind of see that there is some real change. So obviously, you were the face of this campaign, Yes. So just talk a little bit about, what it is.
When I first heard about Choose a Challenge, I thought, oh, this is perfect. I just thought it was the cycling, International Women's Day theme. It was the worldwide theme for International Women's Day this year. It was Choose Challenge, which was so perfect. And for cycling, it could be done in different ways. So you could have your challenge of, riding 50 miles, 100 miles, whatever. But the way my spin on it was challenging.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tradition and challenging just because it's been done that way and challenging the men and the way it's been. So I have a contact with the UCI that came about last year. They'd been interested in what we'd been doing. So they highlighted a few of us team members on Internationelles last year. And actually he got in contact with me and just said, oh, we're doing a piece for International Women's Day. Do you want to be involved? And I was like, yes, instantly. Like when you contacted me, I was like, yes. And I'm like, oh, maybe yes, I don't mind. I'm super keen. I don't say no to many things amazing. At all.
No,
so
it was great.
I was just like, you bet I want to be involved in this. And I had no idea that it would be as powerful and as good. He sent me the script and I presumed it would just be some words over video. I didn't know I'd be on it as much as I was. The turnaround was ridiculous. So I found out about it, I think on a Wednesday, and he said, oh, when can you do it? Basically, International Women's Day is Monday. Can you do it in the next couple of days? So I was like, yeah, cool. So went the next day, which was great for me. I hadn't really left my house the last 2 weeks. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going over to Lee Valley to do some filming. And met a video guy, Adam, and just kept, did quite a few takes of just saying these words. And he said he was then going to edit it over a couple of days. And then the actual video that came through, I found it really powerful. I was really, really
very, very powerful.
Really honoured to be involved in that kind of stuff.
In a short video, I mean, it really showed the breadth of women's cycling. Which is amazing.
Yeah, it was all the different types and diversity and the emotions and everything. It was a really, really great piece of work. So I was delighted, and it was shared a lot. And what was interesting was that the UCI had done a couple of other posts on the same day, and pretty much all of the stuff on my video was positive. And people held off the abuse, but then they were abusing the UCI on equal pay on all their other posts, but my post was positive. So
amazing.
So, that people enjoyed that one because it was about challenging and about making a difference and stuff like that. Whereas there are other ones, people were just like, oh, this is, just for the sake of it and stuff like that.
The question I have and is that if the UCI, really kind of, it's a brilliant step forward, like no doubt about it. But if it's just a bit of a marketing sort of like box check, that's the bit where I kind of go, no, like if this is just a nice thing that your marketing guys go, oh, look, we did a good job. Look at the views, look at the, kind of impressions. But it's not, if the UCI aren't taking that step, I suppose I'm asking the question, are the UCI doing more to work with these race organisers to see some change on a international race level, on a local grassroots level? Do you believe that there is things happening?
I believe they are. I think more can be done. The contacts I have in UCI, they're saying the right things, but it's all very well to say the right things and then quite another to actually do them. So I think change is happening. It could happen faster and more could happen, but I think they're very focused on coverage. So I'm not ignoring the other areas, but I think that I'm hoping by everything that we're doing and the fact that they respect me and the team enough to want me to be involved in their stuff. They're not trying to hush me down or ignore me because they were highlighting me. They tagged us in all of it, so they'll know that people will go looking and see all of our stuff, talking about the discrepancies and prize money and coverage and stuff like that. So I think they believe what we're doing is good and is needed. I think they're moving a bit slowly, but I know,
because obviously what you're doing is good, but it is also very challenging. As in, it's you guys are waving a flag to say things need to change. So it was refreshing to see them get behind that. I think I don't think they are just ticking a box. I think they are doing quite a lot of stuff behind the scenes, which they can't always talk about. But the fact, with the Giro Rosa that they lost their World Tour status, they are changing things and punishing people when they don't do what they have to do as race organisers. Great. This obviously something that happened recently was this, we mentioned earlier, the Rouleau magazine.
Yes.
It was just brilliant.
It was unbelievable. I had never bought Rouleau before. I'd flicked through it when I'd seen it before, but I just, I hadn't bought it. It was just blokes and, arty.
Black and white pictures of blokes.
Yeah, and I didn't really want to read through that. It wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And then when I started hearing about the women's one, I was like, cool, okay, let's see what this is like. So subscribed, and it was amazing. It was a really, really powerful issue, talking about all sorts of stuff, which is just not talked about all the time, and it's, an insight into our racers and stuff like that, who are fabulous role models, but we don't hear enough about them.
Don't hear enough about them.
It was really good. And then Cycling Weekly have done an International Women's Day edition too. So I think, they're having to do more, and not just for the sake of it, it's because there is an appetite for them. So the fact that, they've had to reprint 4 times, that's amazing.
And obviously, it's just brilliant. Obviously, print is going through such a difficult time at the minute, and publications like Rouleau are having to sort of balance between print and online.
Yes.
And then for the magazine, the issue that has done essentially helped not save them, but sort of outperformed anything else, is the women's one.
Yeah,
and it's just awesome. Powerful. Yeah, it's really, really powerful.
It's great. So, and they've committed to doing more, so it's not just going to go back to what it was. So I've subscribed to get more, so I'll keep an eye and make sure that it's not just a token women's issue. And I think, Orla being behind, she's wonderful.
Yeah, she's great.
There's a lot of really great reporters, journalists, stuff who are doing a lot for our sport.
But it was brilliant the way that she did it, and I know she references it in the article that she wrote in the Telegraph. She used a very provocative image on the front.
Yes.
To essentially almost highlight, almost in society, kind of like women should be the pretty things. But actually, when you open up the cover, then you really kind of see, more into, the reality of women in cycling. You just think it's brilliant, so good.
Yeah, got a lot of people talking. So it did the job for sure.
Yeah, a lot of people talking.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what you guys did last year. Internationelles, because obviously with COVID, you weren't able to go and do the Tour de France, unfortunately. But I mean,
so it was tough because we had the team of 10 from 2019 who rode the full tour. We then had 5 who were free to do it again, and 5 who were just like, I'll tick that box. I love what you do, but that was hardcore. No thanks for doing it again. So we had 5 new riders. All 10 of us were set to go to France. And we all hoped that, COVID would have been a bit of a thing last March, April, and then we'd be through it. And then the Tour de France got pushed back, and by quite a few weeks, actually. It was then pushed back to the end of August. So I didn't give up hope. And I kept thinking, we're going to be okay. We had logistics sorted, and we were all looking forward to it being, the end of COVID and and all getting out to France. But then as it got closer and closer, I was like, oh, gosh, I've got some Americans on the team, and they were banned from France. And then eventually, if we'd have gone to France, we'd have had to quarantine when we came back. And it's like, it was just getting messy. So we thought, do you know what? Let's not go. But what can we do to still have an impact? And because we wanted to still have that conversation around the Tour de France and around equality and stuff. So we did we covered the distance of the Tour de France on turbo trainers, like a round the clock relay between the 10 of us from our home locations, and then all of us to cover the elevation of the Tour de France, each of us Everested. So a couple of them had to do it on turbos as well because of where they was in Texas. It was too hot for the riders there to do it.
That's a nice
in
problem
Australia,
to have.
It was their winter. But for us, there's 5 of us in the UK, so we all got together in Wales. There was that wonderful window that we had in between lockdowns last year, which, gosh, it'd be hard to plan something like that now because you just don't know what's going to happen. But we managed to all get together, so we did the turbo stuff together, and then all Everested, and that was pretty cool to tick that off. And last year was a massive year for Everesting. The whole world decided to start doing that,
either
didn't they?
Indoors or outside. It was like, oh my goodness, I've got to say, anybody who does it, fair play.
Yeah. I actually loved it. I'd done quite a lot of research. I'd picked the hill, and I didn't want anything too steep.
No.
Then you'd be dying after a few hours. And I didn't want anything too shallow that it would take 5
just be there
days
for like,
to do
yeah,
it.
exactly.
So it was an average of like 5-6%. This hill in Wales, about half an hour to climb.
Yeah.
And we still had to cover about 300 kilometres.
Yeah,
and it took 17 hours.
Yeah.
But at no point was it impossible or thinking, oh God, I can't get up this hill. It was an endurance thing, and that's what we trained for, is endurance.
So there was 5 of you that Everest did. Mm-hmm. So that's what, 8,500 meters climbing.
Yes.
So 5 of you doing that. So that covers
all 10 of us did. So,
okay, fine.
Yeah. So the elevation of the tour it was over 50,000 meters. Yeah. So I think we needed 6 of us to Everest to tick off the elevation. Gotcha. But all 10 of us did it.
Amazing.
But 5 of us did it together. And what was amazing was it was a 17-hour thing. It took us that long, but we all finished within about 20 minutes of each other. Yeah. So our ability was all thereabouts. Yeah. And it was great. It was good to do.
Again, I was watching it. We were following it on social media. There was a lot of really good coverage around it.
Yeah.
We'll put the links, everything below. But obviously, our good friends, George and Jess.
Yes, George was making videos.
Yeah, they put this video together for it, and all the way through these little daily updates, and then put together this edit.
Yeah.
It was really powerful.
It was really good
because it wasn't about the challenge. It was about the message.
Yes, why we were doing it. Yeah.
Why we were doing it. Yeah. So I suppose on that. What was the message of that?
Well, it was the same stuff that we've been banging on about the year before. But what really fired us up on day one was when La Course happened. Yeah. And it was so incredible, and that amazing sprint finish with Lizzie Dinan winning by millimeters.
Yeah.
And we were just like, and that's it. Yeah. That's their Tour de France equivalent, done in 2-3 hours. Yeah. And that pissed us off. Yeah. And we didn't even get to see the podium stuff. Yeah. It then went on to some wrestling from I don't know what year. But it was just their time slot was done. They'd showed a bit of the race. They didn't show the medal ceremony. We were just like, oh my God, this isn't good enough. Yeah. And then it's just stuff like that was just firing us up to try and make a difference and just say, this is not good enough. Yeah. And just to disrupt all the noise around men and cycling around the Tour de France. And that's what we'll do again this year. The way things are looking, even if our UK roadmap goes to plan, it's still looking pretty dodgy in France. They're way behind on vaccines compared to us. It's the virus is raging over there with the international team, and travel is difficult. So I'm pretty much sure we won't be going to France this year, but we will be doing stuff to keep talking about equality and to disrupt all the noise around the Tour de France and just keep the pressure on for an actual equivalent and some equality.
Well, I mean, I was going to ask. I mean, with regards to Internationelles, like moving forward, what's the vision? What's the plan? Do you have any bigger plans that you guys want to achieve, or is it just a case of just keep tapping away?
Keep tapping. So when we were in France a couple of years ago, I think about maybe day 10 or 11 of the tour, we heard that the ASO was saying that Women's Tour de France is done, and we were like, oh, cool, let's just go home, we're done. We can rest. And then we were just like, hang on, you're just talking about, we'll put a focus group, we'll do some stuff. So we just kept pushing. Ideally, we wouldn't even have to do it anymore. We would actually just go around on a victory loop of, yay, we've got equality. Yeah. But sadly, with all the stuff that's still happening now, there's so much work still to be done.
Have you guys had any contact with or contact from? So, I mean, ASO, obviously, ASO, for listeners who don't know, ASO, the organisation who organised the Tour de France and a number of other races, including Paris-Roubaix. Yeah. But have you had contact with them? Have they fed back?
The French team actually met with them last year.
Interesting.
So, and they've given them more information about there being a Women's Tour de France
wow,
next year. So the French team have actually backed off in quite a lot of their, vigorous protesting to actually saying a Women's Tour de France is coming. We support it. Yeah. Get on board with watching it. So they've kind of changed their tactic a bit because they do have contact with the ASO. Well, so they're saying the right thing.
La Course is it's this token event, and it hasn't been going for that long. And yes, unfortunately, it doesn't get any coverage. But it's almost like the Tour is a really exciting race to watch. You know, it's 3 weeks, as you say, like it's the best of France. It's beautiful. Everybody gets behind it. There's always these Queen stages. Yeah. And it's almost as if the Champs-Elysees is like, in my opinion, it's like the most boring stage because it's finishing up. Yes, it's exciting to kind of see it, but it's just this ceremony. And it's like they just kind of threw this at the women. So basically, for listeners who don't know what it is, the course happens the same day and the last day of the Tour de France. It's a short race. It almost feels like a crit, really, but it's basically just laps of Paris.
Yeah,
and it's so boring. Of all the
Nice, but it wasn't even the full stage.
Yeah, sure.
It's just.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, yeah, you're right. Last year it was.
It was meant to be Paris, and they changed it when the Tour got pushed back, and they did part of stage 1 of the men's race. And this year is the same. They're doing just part of that.
Yeah.
But it is basically a crit race. A couple of years ago, there was 2 stages because there was a really great mountain finish.
Yeah.
But it's still not enough.
No, it's not enough.
So yeah, just to get La Course first, there was a lot of protesting. Catherine Bertine had done, a lot of work to even get that to happen, and the ASO eventually agreed to it. But this isn't what they agreed to. They agreed to a lot more, and it is a token effort.
Yeah.
But hopefully from next year, it'll roll out to be more. I don't think the pros want all 21 stages. A few of the female pros are like, hang on, we don't necessarily want to ride 21 stages, but we want more than one day.
But it just seems like, with everything going on, it feels like it's this, getting back to this loop thing, there's been so much good that's been happening around the sport. We have some legitimate female presenters.
Yeah.
We're good friends with Rebecca Charlton. Obviously, she's been hosting, the track stuff for a long time, very vocal. Orla now is like a key anchor at Eurosport. Mm-hmm. And they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
It's not like it's just this token thing. It's like, no, this is legit.
Yeah.
And obviously with the women's issue of rouleur and it's all these things, but yet the focus bit is still lacking. Mm-hmm. So credit to you and what you're doing, because let's hope it just continue to build on these things that actually for the girls growing up can actually look to being a professional cyclist as a legitimate career, just as much as the men.
Yeah, well, they can turn it on TV and they can see it and want to be it. Yeah. Whereas if they never see it, they'll just think, oh, I'm not a boy, so I can't do that.
But it's interesting, they can see it now.
Yes.
Which is, to a point, not as much as we'd like, but they can see it. Mm-hmm. But then you start digging below the surface and you're like, oh, €900. I mean, granted, Omloop's not the biggest race, but it is a race, and it's a race that everybody, has been watching.
Yes.
So let's hope some more things change. So that's obviously on the kind of like the grander sort of like professional international level. Mm-hmm. What do you think we can do locally here in the UK? Mm-hmm. What can be done to kind of see more women get on bikes?
I think just encourage them. Yeah. Just if you've got a bike, get out there, ride on it. Yeah. Help people, but don't mansplain, that kind of stuff. It's tricky for men because often they might want to help and stuff, but then if you're not asking for help, you don't need to give it. Yeah. And there's a way of giving help without being condescending and or rude as well. So it's tough for the guys. I'm sure it is. But it's just get out there, just get on a bike, go for a ride with other people, ask questions. There's no questions that are too stupid, and you don't have to have all the kit. You don't have to be clipped in. You just go at your own pace, and your fitness will come, and your enjoyment will come with that too. And just take it in your own strides, but just try and enjoy it. The main thing is just enjoy, and don't let anyone make you feel you're not part of it, because there is no certain type that can ride. Anyone on a bike is a cyclist. Yeah,
absolutely right. It's something that we've been putting a lot of thought and energy into, around here. We're in Surrey, which has become, for the last 10 or so, 10, 15 years has become a very busy place for riding a bike. And in particular, since lockdown, it's become incredibly congested. And, I've been riding bikes around here for the best part of 15 years. At the minute, I find it really stressful. There's a lot of people out there. Yes. And I'm somebody who's an experienced rider. Yeah. So I can understand that for a new cyclist, in particular a female cyclist, it's not, even though you might want to, because you get all the benefits of riding outside and all those wonderful things, that kind of entry into it is difficult. It's a very, very big first hurdle. So we've been sort of challenging ourselves here, like internally, and then speaking amongst our sort of like riders and crews, like what can we do? Like, is there anything that we can do? And a big part of it is we're going to start to offer development rides again as soon as we can. Mm-hmm. Just focusing on those new riders to start to bridge that gap, where we can kind of take some experienced riders, share a bit of wisdom, share some tips, and we'll see how we can do it on social media as well.
Yeah.
But just to encourage people just to get out,
I think so,
and
maybe
break down that barrier,
like changing a flat and stuff like that.
100%.
Because all of that is just that's the shit part of cycling. That when I was starting out, I think I had an unlucky couple of weeks where I got 3 flats and I nearly gave up. I was just like, oh my God, I can't be coping with this.
Yeah.
But once you've got confidence in changing it, then, and you can ask for help. It's okay to ask for help and stuff. But just that bit of confidence to know that you can get yourself out of a flat tire situation.
I mean, that's definitely a big one. And we've got Danny, our mechanic, who's, keen to sort of do some like workshops and like just the real basics, which is cool. And once we're able to, we'll be able to kind of do those sessions again. But
I think more needs to be done about educating drivers and stuff too, that I found over the last year, people should be a bit more chilled out because, we're in lockdown. Where are you going in such an emergency? But it's shocking. I spent a lot of time on my turbo for last year because I've got 2 little kids, so I was homeschooling, and that's normally when I ride is when they're at school. So suddenly they're not at school, so I'm on my turbo. And then any time I did get to go out, something would happen, and that cars would be trying to push me off the road, and I just thought, my God, I can hold my own, and I'm no stranger to a swear word, so I would. But someone else, they'd never go out again.
No.
It's scary. Yeah. And drivers, if they get really worked up about people riding in twos, there's nothing in the highway code that says we can't ride in twos.
Well, I mean, we could do a whole podcast about this, and this is something I feel immensely sort of like passionate, and because I believe that there are some bad drivers out there who don't know the rules.
Bad riders too.
But unfortunately, there are some bad riders out there that also don't know the rules.
And they give us all a bad name.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
And I think that we, certainly from our standpoint and the cycling community here at Giro, like I know that there's things that we can do, and we're going to, and it's just a case of playing our part, so that if we do come across a angry driver, or if we get in contact with a local resident that's kind of feels angry about the number of cyclists, at least we can point them to, well, this is what we're doing.
Yes, yeah.
And let's say sort of a lady says, right, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get out on the bike. And then they're presented with an aggressive driver, or they're presented with a group of cyclists who just kind of burn past it. There's all these things. It's we need to. It all plays a part of the same thing that we need to, that I do feel that we should take responsibility for.
Yes.
And carry on.
Yeah.
Louise, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. We'll put all the links to everything, the video that George did, talking about last year. And look, just keep in contact with us. I'd love to sort of touch base a little bit more regularly. Let us know how we can support. Let us know how listeners can support. Actually, that's a great point. How can listeners kind of be a part of the conversation that you guys are doing?
And follow us on social media at Internationelles, and my own account's Lou Q. We'll keep you updated with everything we're doing. So we're making plans for the summer now. So when we can talk about those, we will.
Yes.
And just watch women cycling. Yeah. Follow all of the pros on social media. Yeah. The more you find out about them, the better it gets. Yeah. Watch their races, talk about it, and just if you can help people, do. Yeah. And just get out on a bike and enjoy it.
For anybody who's listening who doesn't watch women's cycling, it's much more exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember back in the Olympics. I mean, that was 11 years ago. No, 9 years ago. 9 years ago, yeah. The women's race on the Saturday and then the men's on the Sunday. The women's race was so much more exciting. It was attack after attack after attack. It's great. Yeah. So definitely recommend watching it. And we've got some great UK talent in the women's pro peloton as well.
Yeah. So all that helps. That's driving demand. It's driving more conversation about women's cycling. Yeah. It all helps and it all boosts it. So that's how people can.
And hopefully, these people who have committed their life to a sport that they love can get rewarded for it and get honoured for it. Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation, and hopefully there's more change coming.
Yes.